Rain hammered the windshield the night Damien Viscari's world came apart at a red light. He had a diamond on his fiancée's hand, 300 people toasting his name, and a city that flinched when he walked through it. Then the crosswalk filled, and a woman he'd buried 4 years ago stepped in front of his headlights holding two small hands. A boy turned toward the glare. Steel gray eyes. His eyes. The most feared man in Harrow City sat behind the wheel of a car worth more than a house and forgot how to breathe. If you stay with this story to the end, hit that like button and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. The party ended at 11:40, which meant it ended when Damien Viscari stood up. 300 people in the ballroom of the Ordway Hotel, and not one of them left before he did. That was the arithmetic of his life. Waiters kept pouring. The quartet kept playing something with strings in it. Men who had killed for him ate salmon off small plates and laughed too loudly at each other's jokes. And their wives touched Celeste Moreau's arm and said the ring was gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And Celeste smiled the way she'd been smiling for 6 hours, which was beautifully and without any part of her face changing. Damien stood. The room noticed within 4 seconds. He counted, because he always counted. "You're leaving," Victor Soren said. He'd appeared at Damien's left shoulder the way he always did, close enough to be useful, close enough to be a problem. 41 years old, built like a man who still went to the gym out of spite, a scar through one eyebrow he'd never explained to anybody and never would. "I'm leaving." "It's your engagement party." It was. Victor's mouth did something that was almost a smile. "The Delano people flew in from out of state. They'll want a photograph. Then take one with them. That's not the same, and you know it." Damien looked at him, just looked. It lasted about a second and a half, and Victor's chin came down half an inch, and that was the whole conversation. "I'll handle the room," Victor said. "You always do." Celeste came across the floor in a champagne-colored dress that had cost more than his first car, holding her clutch in both hands like a schoolgirl carrying a book. She was 30, from money, and she'd never once in 8 months asked him a question she didn't already know the answer to. That had been the appeal. A woman who didn't ask. A woman whose father owned 4 shipping licenses and whose family name opened doors that bullets couldn't. "You're doing the thing," she said. "What thing?" "Where you look at everyone like you're pricing them." "I am pricing them." "I know." She slid her hand through his arm. Her fingers were cold. They were always cold, even in July. "Take me home before my face falls off." The valet had the car under the canopy with the door already open, and the kid holding the door was 20 and shaking, and Damien tipped him $200 because the shaking annoyed him and he wanted it to stop. He drove himself. He always drove himself. 2 cars ahead, 2 behind, men in them who'd been with him since he was 24, but his hands on his own wheel. That was the one thing he never gave away. The rain started before they cleared the block. It came down the way it does in that city in late April, sideways and cold, hitting the glass hard enough to sound like gravel. The wipers couldn't keep up. Lassiter Avenue turned into a river of red taillights and neon smeared into long streaks, the whole downtown melting and running. Celeste took her heels off in the footwell and put her head back against the leather. "Your uncle asked me when we're having children," she said. "My uncle's an idiot. He asked in front of 11 people. Then he's a public idiot." Damien changed lanes. "What'd you tell him?" "I told him that was between me and my fiancée." She turned her head against the headrest. In the wash of the streetlights, her face had that flat, expensive calm she wore like armor, which raises the question of whether it actually is. Whether it's what? "Between us." She let it sit. "You've never brought it up. Not once. 8 months, a ring, 300 witnesses, and you have never once said the word children in my presence." The light at Dunmore went yellow, and Damien slowed for it instead of running it, which he almost never did, and afterward he'd think about that. About how a single decision to touch a brake pedal instead of an accelerator restructured the rest of a man's life. "We'll talk about it," he said. "That's not an answer, that's a postponement." "It's the answer you're getting tonight." The light went red. The car stopped. The wipers dragged across the glass with that rubber shriek they make when the rain gets ahead of them. And the crosswalk filled up. 40, 50 people, that late-night downtown flood. Theater crowd, restaurant crowd, kids in wet jackets holding phones over their heads, an old man with an umbrella turned inside out fighting it like it owed him money. Headlights caught them all and made them into a moving wall of shapes. Damien wasn't looking at any of them. He was looking at the middle distance the way he'd looked at middle distance his entire adult life, thinking about a shipment out of Pier 19 and a man named Kessler, who was going to have to be dealt with by Thursday. Then his eyes went to the left, for no reason at all, and stopped. She was on the far side of the crossing, coming toward him. Gray coat, too thin for the weather, soaked through at the shoulders. Hair pulled back and coming loose from it. She was walking fast, chin down against the rain, and she had a child's hand in each of hers. 4 years, and his body knew her before his brain would allow it. Knew the walk. Knew that specific way she led with her right shoulder, like she was pushing through a door that wasn't there. Knew the shape of her mouth when she was cold. Lena. Something in Damien's chest closed like a fist. The children were small, 6, maybe. A boy and a girl, both in raincoats a size too big. The girl's yellow, the boy's green, both of them jogging to keep up with her stride. The girl was talking, her mouth going a mile a minute, water running off her hood. The boy wasn't talking. The boy was walking with his head tipped back to feel the rain on his face, the way kids do when nobody's told them not to yet. They passed in front of the hood, 10 feet away. 8. And the boy turned toward the headlights. The high beams caught him full in the face. He squinted, one hand coming up, and for maybe a second and a half, Damien counted, God help him, he counted. The kid looked directly through the windshield at the man behind the wheel. Gray eyes. Not blue-gray. Not the color people call gray when they mean something else. Flat, metallic, cold water gray. The exact gray that had looked back at Damien Viscari out of every mirror he'd ever stood in front of. The gray, his mother used to say, came from a great-grandfather nobody had a photograph of. The boy blinked against the light. Lena's hand pulled him along, and then they were past the hood and moving up the far sidewalk, and the crowd swallowed them. Gray coat, yellow coat, green coat, gone. The light turned green. Damien didn't move. Behind him a horn went off. Then another. The car directly behind laid on it and held it, a long flat animal noise under the rain. Damien. Celeste had her head up now. Green. He didn't hear her. He was staring at the empty crosswalk, at the place where the 3 of them had been, and every system in his body had gone offline at once. His hands were locked on the wheel at 10 and 2. His jaw had set so hard he could feel the muscle jumping under his ear. There was a sound in his head, like a room emptying out. Damien. Celeste's hand landed on his forearm. You're going to get us rear-ended by a Camry. He came back into himself all at once, like a man surfacing. The car moved. 15 feet, 20. His eyes went to the right-hand mirror, hunting the sidewalk, finding 100 wet strangers under 100 wet awnings, and none of them her. He pulled the wheel right without signaling. The tires bit the curb lane. Somebody's horn screamed past. What are you doing? Nothing. You're pulling over in the middle of... He put the car in park in a loading zone with the hazards going and got out into the rain. It came down on him instantly, soaking through a $4,000 jacket in the time it took to walk 20 feet. He stood on the corner of Lassiter and Dunmore in a suit that cost more than most people's rent and turned in a slow circle, scanning, and the rain ran down his face and into his collar, and he didn't feel it. Sidewalk, awnings, a pharmacy with the lights half out, a bus shelter with 4 people crammed in it, and none of them her. A bus pulling away from the shelter with its windows fogged white so you couldn't see anything inside but shapes. He watched the bus go 3 blocks and turn. The chase car had stopped behind his. Marco got out, one hand inside his jacket, head on a swivel. Boss, you good? We got a problem? Damien didn't answer. Boss. Get back in the car. Is there a Get back in the car, Marco. Marco got back in the car. Damien stood on that corner another 40 seconds. His shirt stuck to his back. Water ran off the end of his nose. I was thinking, with the cold, flat efficiency he'd built his entire life on, that he had probably imagined it. That a man sees a certain kind of woman at a certain kind of hour, and his brain fills in a face it misses. That there were 4 million people in this city and 100,000 women with brown hair and gray coats. And under that, in a place he didn't like to go, Another voice said, "You know the way she walks." He got back in the car dripping. Celeste watched him for a while without saying anything. She was good at that. It was one of the things that had made him think, briefly, that this could work. "Was it someone you know?" she asked when they were on the bridge. "No." "Damien?" "No." She looked out the window at the black water and the string of lights along the far bank. Then she said, in a voice with absolutely nothing in it, "You know it's very strange to be engaged to a man who lies to you about things that don't matter. It makes a person wonder about the things that do." He didn't answer that either. Lena Ashford got the twins up the 4 flights at 12:10 with a bag of groceries on one arm and Mira asleep on her shoulder before the 3rd landing. The building was on Cranby, above a laundromat that ran its dryers until 2 and pumped heat and lint smell up through the floorboards, which in January was a blessing and in July was a punishment. 4 flights, no elevator, a hallway light that worked when it felt like it. She got the door open with her chin against Mira's hair and her key in the second of 3 locks. "Noah, boots off in the hall." "They're not muddy." "Boots off in the hall." He sat down right there on the doormat and pulled them off and set them side by side, toes to the wall, the way he did everything, precisely and without argument. 6 years old, and he lined up his shoes like a soldier. She'd never taught him that. He'd arrived that way. She put Mira down on the bottom bunk, still in her coat, worked the sleeves off, got the wet socks off her feet. The girl didn't wake up. Mira slept like the dead and woke up talking. Noah slept badly and woke up silent, and Lena had long ago stopped pretending she didn't know exactly where each of those things came from. She came back out. Noah was standing at the window in his socks with the curtain pushed back, looking down at Cranby Street. "Bed." "There was a car," he said. Lena's hand stopped on the strap of the grocery bag. "There are a lot of cars, baby." "At the light, a black one." He was still looking down at the street. "The man was looking at me." The refrigerator hummed. The dryers thudded 4 floors down, a slow, arrhythmic knocking through the walls. "What man?" Lena said. Her voice came out even. 4 years of practice had made it come out even. Noah shrugged with one shoulder. "The man in the car." "People look at kids in crosswalks, Noah. That's how you don't get hit by them." "Okay." He let the curtain drop. He walked past her toward the bunk and then stopped and looked up at her with those eyes. And she made herself not flinch because she had made herself not flinch at those eyes twice a day for 6 years, and she was very, very good at it now. "You're doing your face," he said. "What face?" "The one where your mouth goes flat." "That's just my face, Bug. Go to bed." He went. She stood in the middle of the kitchen with a bag of groceries she hadn't put down, and after a minute she set it on the counter very carefully, the way you do when you don't trust your hands. And she went to the sink and turned the cold on and put her wrists under it. She had seen the car. She had seen it, and she had put her head down and she had walked, because that was the only thing she had ever known how to do about Damien Viscari. Put her head down and walk and keep walking, out of a hospital in a city she'd never been back to, out of a life, out of a name. Black sedan, low, custom, the kind of car that doesn't make noise. 2 behind it that stayed exactly the same distance back through 2-lane changes. She was probably wrong. There were 1,000 black cars. She looked at her own reflection in the dark window over the sink. 32 years old, wet hair, a face that had gotten sharper every year since she left. In an apartment with 3 locks on the door and a fire escape she'd tested with her own body weight, so she'd know it would hold 2 kids and a woman. "You're wrong," she told the window. The window didn't argue. It never did. It just sat there and let her lie to it. He didn't sleep. Damien sat in the dark of the penthouse on Ormond with a glass of something he hadn't drunk from, and the rain moved down the floor-to-ceiling glass in long crawling seams, and the city lay out there under it, 40 stories down, all his and worth exactly nothing at 4 in the morning. Celeste had gone to bed at 2, and she'd stood in the doorway of the bedroom a long moment first, backlit, arms folded, saying nothing, waiting for him to say something that would make the evening make sense. He hadn't. She'd shut the door with a click that was somehow louder than a slam. At 6, he called Emil Kraus. Kraus answered on the second ring, wide awake, because Kraus was always wide awake. He was 61 and looked like a retired high school principal, and had, over 22 years, located 11 people who had gone to a considerable amount of trouble not to be located. He'd never worked for the organization directly. Damien had made sure of that. Kraus worked for Damien, and Damien alone, and got paid in cash out of an account that had no name attached to it. "It's early," Kraus said. "I need someone found." Alive or otherwise? Alive. Untouched. You don't approach. You don't photograph her doorway. You don't sit on the street. I want a name, an address, and a history, and I want her to never know anybody looked. A pause. Papers moving on Kraus's end. That's a narrow way to do this. That's the only way it's getting done. Name? Damien didn't say it for a second. It felt strange in his mouth, like a language he used to speak. Lena Ashford. 31, 32 now. Last known was 4 years ago. This city, Riverbend area. Nurse. Pediatric floor at St. Brennan's before it closed. He stopped. And there'll be 2 children, 6 years old, twins. The silence on the line stretched out. Twins, Kraus said. Do you want the job or not? I want to make sure I understand the job. Kraus's voice didn't change at all. Because there's a version of this where I find a woman who ran from you, and I hand you her address, and something happens to her. I've been doing this a long time, Mr. Viscari. I've handed over addresses I still think about. Damien watched a plane's lights crawl across the rain-dark sky. If anything happens to that woman, he said, it'll be because I failed to prevent it, not because I caused it. That's not a no. It's the most honest sentence I've said in 4 years. Take it or hang up. Kraus took it. Well, the organization met on Tuesdays in the back of a restaurant on Delcourt that had been losing money on purpose since 1988. Damien came in at 11 and sat at the head of a table with a paper cloth on it and 11 men around it. And for the first 40 minutes, it went the way it always went. The port, the union thing, a councilman with a gambling problem who needed to be reminded whose problem it was. Damien listened. Damien decided. Men wrote nothing down because nobody wrote anything down. Victor Soren sat at his right, and Victor talked more than he used to. The Delano arrangement, Victor said, they want an answer by Friday. They'll get one Monday. They flew 4 people in for your engagement, Damien, and they ate very well. A couple of the older men laughed. Victor didn't. With respect, Victor said, and everyone at that table understood exactly how much respect was in it. We've been slow on 3 decisions this month. Kessler's still walking around. The Delano thing's been open since March. The men notice. The men, Damien said. They talk. Then you should tell me what they say, since you're clearly listening. Victor spread his hands, easy, smiling, the picture of a loyal second. They say the boss is getting married. They say a man getting married has other things on his mind. They're happy for you. That's all it is. The room got very quiet. There was a difference between quiet, and every man there knew which one this was. Damien put down his water glass and turned in his chair to face Victor fully, which he almost never did. 14 years ago, he said, you were bleeding out in the back of a van on Rennick with a hole in you the size of a fist. And I drove you to a man who owed me a favor, and I sat in a chair outside that room for 9 hours. You remember that? I remember it. Then you remember that I don't move fast. I move once. Damien let that sit. Kessler dies when it costs me nothing. Delano signs when they're desperate enough to sign badly. And the next time you take the temperature of a room and bring it to me at a table, do it in a hallway instead. It's better for you. Victor's smile stayed exactly where it was, which was the problem. A man who could hold a smile through that was a man who had already decided something. Understood, Victor said. Under the table, Damien's phone vibrated once against his thigh. He didn't look at it until he was in the car. Kraus. 2 lines of text, no greeting, the way Kraus always wrote. Found her. This is going to take a conversation. What? They met at 8 that night in the parking structure under the Verlaine building, level 4, where the cameras had been dead since a maintenance contract Damien had personally made sure never got renewed. Kraus got into the passenger seat with a folder in his lap and rein in the shoulders of his coat. He was carrying it like it weighed something. You want the short version or the whole thing? Whole thing. Then don't interrupt me because I'll lose the thread. Damien put both hands on the wheel of a parked car and looked straight ahead at a concrete pillar. Lena Marie Ashford, Kraus said, left St. Brennan's Hospital 4 years ago in March. Not fired, not laid off. Walked. Gave 9 hours notice. Cleared out an apartment on Riverbend in a day and a half. Sold everything that didn't fit in a car she bought for $1,100 cash. Left the state. Was in 2 other cities that I can document. Came back here 14 months ago. Came back, Damien said. You said don't interrupt. Keep going. She's got a nursing license she's never once used since she left. Not in any state. A woman with a pediatric RN and 8 years of experience. And she's been working aides jobs, home health, night shift, cash where she can get it, W-2 where she can't. Currently 3 jobs. Overnight home care 4 nights a week for an 80-year-old man in Fairlawn. Weekend stocking at a wholesale place off Route 6. And she cleans 2 office floors downtown on Wednesdays, which is why she was on Lassiter Tuesday night at 11, if that's what you're going to ask. Damien's jaw moved. She won't use the license. She won't use the license, Krause agreed. You want my read on that? It's the same reason she's never once filed a change of address with the post office, and the same reason her mail goes to a box she pays for in a different name. A license is a public record with a home state and a photo on it. She's not avoiding work. She's avoiding a database. Who's she hiding from? Krause was quiet a second. You're a smart man. You want me to say it out loud? Say it out loud. She's hiding from everyone, which includes you. He opened the folder without looking at it. Now here's the part I had trouble with. In 4 years, that woman has not touched $1 of your money. She had an account. She has an account, opened in her name, funded by a shell of yours out of the Cayman structure, and I want you to understand I had to do some genuinely illegal things to see the balance on it, so we're never discussing this again. Krause tapped the folder once. It's grown, interest only, not one withdrawal, not one transfer. $406,000 sitting there, and she's been buying generic cereal on a debit card that overdrafts twice a year. Something went through Damien's chest like a wire being pulled tight. There's more, Krause said. About 2.5 years ago, there was an incident in the second city she was in. Police report, minor, filed as attempted burglary. Somebody tried the door of her apartment at 4 in the morning. Nothing taken, nobody hurt, no arrest. She moved 11 days later. He turned a page. 9 months after that, in the third city, a man approached her at a bus stop and asked her by name whether she had children. She reported that one too. Different name on the report, but same handwriting on the signature line. I compared them. That's my job. The concrete pillar in front of the car didn't move. Damien's hand stayed at 10 and 2 on a wheel that wasn't going anywhere. Who? He said, and his voice came out with something underneath it that had never been in his voice at that table on Delcourt. I don't know. And I want to be very clear that I don't know because I could give you 3 guesses and you'd act on one of them and I'd be responsible for a body. Krause closed the folder. Somebody has been looking for that woman for at least 2.5 years. Somebody who knows to ask about children. She has moved 4 times, changed the kid's school twice, and she runs her whole life out of cash in a P.O. box and a false name. That is not a woman being dramatic. That's a woman being hunted and doing a hell of a good job of not being caught. Rain sound, far off, at the mouth of the structure. The children, Damien said. Krause reached into the folder and came out with a single photograph and set it face down on the console between them. School registration photo, enrollment file, Marden Elementary, Cranby District. I want you to know I got this from a records clerk with a mortgage problem, and I've already made sure she doesn't remember who asked. He didn't take his hand off it. Noah Ashford and Mira Ashford. Date of birth is the 11th of December, 6 years back. Damien did the arithmetic without wanting to. March. She left 4 years ago, which meant the twins had already been 2 years old when she walked out of St. Brennan's with 9 hours' notice, which meant they'd been born the December after the summer he ended it, which meant that when he'd stood in that apartment on Riverbend and told her, in words he'd rehearsed in a car for 40 minutes so they'd come out flat enough to be believed, that she'd been a mistake, that this was over, that she should be grateful. She had been standing in front of him already carrying them. She hadn't said a word. He remembered that. He'd braced for screaming, and she'd just stood there with her hand on the back of a kitchen chair, and after a long time she'd said okay. And he'd left. And he'd told himself all the way down the stairs that the quiet meant she hadn't loved him that much anyway. Father's line on the enrollment, Damien said. Blank. Blank. Not deceased. Not unknown. Blank. Krause finally lifted his hand off the photograph. Whatever else that woman is, she's never once put your name on a piece of paper that could be found. Damien turned the photograph over. Two kids on a bench in front of a cinderblock wall in matching stiff-collared shirts somebody had ironed. The girl was mid-laugh, head tipped, one front tooth missing. The boy was looking directly into the lens with his hands flat on his knees, not smiling, not sulking, just looking. A 6-year-old with the still assessing face of a man 25 years older, and those eyes. There was a long stretch of nothing in that car. Then Damien Vescari, who had ordered a man drowned in a settling tank on a Sunday afternoon and eaten dinner that night with an appetite, made a sound in the back of his throat like something tearing loose. He put his hand over his mouth. He held it there. His eyes stayed open and locked on the photograph, and his shoulders came up once, hard, and went down. Kraus looked out his own window at the concrete and said nothing at all, which was the single most professional thing he had done in 22 years. After a while, Damien lowered his hand. "Address," he said. "You're not going to like the next thing I say." "Address, Emil." "I'll give you the address." Kraus put the folder on the dash. "But I've been paid to find 11 people for you, and I've never once given you advice, so I'd like to spend the credit now. If you drive over there tonight and knock on that door, you are the loudest thing that has ever happened on that street. Cars sitting outside a building on Cranby get noticed. You get noticed. And whoever's been asking about her at bus stops for 2.5 years, the second they get a whiff that Damien Vescari is standing on the sidewalk in that neighborhood, they don't have to look for her anymore. You'll have carried her to them in your own 2 hands." Damien didn't move for a long moment. "How long have I got before somebody finds them anyway?" "Honestly?" Kraus pulled his coat straight. "I found her in 31 hours. I'm better than most people, but I'm not 31 hours better." Well, Celeste Moreau had been raised to understand that a woman's real power was in what she noticed and never mentioned. She noticed that Damien came home at 1 in the morning on Wednesday with his tie already off and got into the shower without a word. She noticed that he'd stopped touching his phone in front of her. She noticed that on Thursday he canceled a dinner with her father, whose 4 shipping licenses had been the entire architecture of the engagement, and gave no reason, and when she'd asked, had said something came up in the tone of a man closing a door with his foot. Mostly she noticed the crosswalk. She'd been watching his hands. That was her habit, in cars, in restaurants. She read men by their hands because faces lie better. And at that light on Lassiter, his hands had gone white on the wheel, both of them, all at once, and stayed white for the length of time it takes a crowd to cross a street. Then he'd pulled into a loading zone and stood out in the rain in a $9,000 suit like a man searching a beach. He'd said no. Not, "No, I don't know them," just no, twice. Flat. 8 months of Damien Vescari, and she'd never once seen him lie badly. That was what kept her up. Not the lie. The badness of it. She started with the party photographs because there were 400 of them and nobody thinks about photographers. Then she went and stood in the dark of his study on a Thursday night with a glass of wine she wasn't drinking, and she didn't touch the desk because she wasn't stupid, and there was a man named Marco downstairs who would report anything. She just looked at the room. And on the second shelf of a bookcase full of books he had never once opened in her presence, there was a copy of a marine engineering manual with the spine cracked in exactly one place. She took it down. Something was pressed flat in the crack. A photograph, 4 years old, sun-faded on one edge. 2 people on a fire escape somewhere, a bottle between them. Damien with more hair and less weight, and a face she had genuinely never seen on him. Open, caught mid-laugh, 20 pounds of tension missing from his shoulders. And a woman in a hospital scrub top, leaning into him, her bare foot hooked over his ankle, looking at the camera like she'd been about to say something rude to whoever was holding it. Celeste stood in the dark and looked at that photograph for a long, long time. She had been engaged for 6 days. She had known Damien Vescari for 8 months and had never once made him laugh like that, and had, if she was being scrupulously honest with herself, never once tried. She was not a woman who cried, and she didn't. What she felt instead came up cold and clean and very clear, and she recognized it as the same thing she'd felt at 19 when her father put a boy she liked on a plane to another country over a business consideration. Not grief. Calculation. She put the photograph back in the book, and the book back on the shelf, exactly 1/8 of an inch out from its neighbors, the way it had been. Then she went downstairs and sent a text message to a number she'd taken off a card that Victor Soren had put into her hand at the party, closing her fingers around it a half second longer than he needed to, saying anything you need. I need to understand my fiancé better. Do you have time this week? The reply came in 90 seconds. I've got nothing but time for you. Martin Elementary let out at 3:15 on Friday. Damien parked 4 blocks away in a gray sedan with municipal plates that Kraus had produced without being asked, and he walked. Nobody in the history of the city had ever seen Damien Vescari walk 4 blocks in the rain, which was exactly why it worked. He stood across the street from the fence with a hood up and his hands in his pockets and watched 140 children pour out of a set of double doors like water out of a burst pipe. He found them in 11 seconds. Mira came out first, backward, walking backward and talking to 2 other girls with her arms going, a backpack half off one shoulder, and she tripped over the curb and didn't stop talking. The boy came out 4 steps behind her with his straps on both shoulders and his eyes moving over the parking lot, the fence line, the street, the cars. 6 years old, and the kid cleared a room. Damien's throat closed. Lena was at the corner by the crossing guard. She looked thinner than she used to. She had her hands jammed in her coat pockets and her chin down, and when Mira reached her, she went down on one knee right there on the wet sidewalk to zip the girl's jacket to the top and said something, and Mira laughed so hard she staggered. Then Lena stood up and turned her head, and for a fraction of a second she looked directly across the street. Damien didn't move. He was a hooded shape in a doorway 40 yards off, one of 9 adults standing around in the rain. She looked a half second too long. Then she took a hand each and walked them east, and she didn't look back, and she picked up her pace, and Damien watched her get all the way to the corner before he let out the breath he'd been holding. I was still standing there 5 minutes later when his phone rang. Kraus. No greeting. Are you at the school? Why? Because I'm 2 streets over from the school, and there is a white panel van on Prewitt with a man in it who has been sitting there since 2:40, and I want you to tell me he's yours. Everything in Damien's body went very quiet and very cold. He's not mine. Then get off the street. Say the plate. The plate. Damien, say the plate, Emil. Kraus said the plate. Damien stood in the rain with the phone against his ear and read the number twice in his head, and the second time through, something in the middle of his chest went out like a light. He knew that plate. He knew it because he'd signed for a fleet of 11 of them in a warehouse office on Aldous 2 years ago, and he'd handed the keys to the man who ran his transport crews, and that man had handed them out himself, one at a time, to people he personally trusted. The van belonged to Victor Sorin. Damien turned east toward the corner where a woman in a gray coat had just walked away holding 2 small hands and started running. He ran east on Prewitt with his coat open and the rain coming into his mouth, and 40 yards in he understood he wasn't going to reach her because the white van was already rolling. It came off the curb slow, no signal, wipers on the low setting, and it turned onto Cranby ahead of him. Damien stopped in the middle of the street. A city bus laid on its horn and swung around him, and somebody screamed something out a window, and he didn't hear any of it. He watched the van slide up Cranby at 15 miles an hour behind a woman in a gray coat and 2 kids, and he watched it not pass them. He cut through the alley behind the laundromat. He hadn't run flat out in 11 years, and his body told him about it. The tearing in his side, the taste of iron at the back of his throat, his shoes going out from under him on wet cardboard. And he came out of the alley mouth onto Cranby 40 feet ahead of the van and stepped into the road. The van stopped 4 feet from his knees. For a second, through the streaked windshield, the driver's face didn't compute. It was a face out of a Christmas party. It was a face from a hospital waiting room 14 years ago on Rennick. Then it computed, and the man's mouth came open. Damien came around the driver's door and had it open before the lock came down. He got a fistful of jacket and pulled, and the man came out of the seat and onto the wet street on his knees, and Damien put him against the panel of his own van hard enough to rock it on its springs. Boss, wait, whose van? It's a company. Whose van, Dominic? Dominic Farrow was 36 years old and had 400 pounds of bench press in him, and he did not lift a hand. That told Damien more than anything he was about to say. Victor's, Dominic said. It's Victor's, boss, I'm just… How long? What? How long have you been sitting on that school? Dominic's eyes went past Damien's shoulder, up the street, and Damien turned his head an inch and saw the gray coat and the 2 coats, yellow and green, reach the corner of Cranby and Holloway and go around it and out of sight. Look at me. How long? Today. Just today. I swear on… Damien hit him. Not a punch, a short, hard shove of the heel of his hand into Dominic's sternum that put him flat against the van again and emptied his lungs. You want to try that again while you can't breathe? Take your time. Dominic dragged air. Rain ran off his nose. 8 days, he said. 8 days. Him and Rennie rotate. He said it was a debt thing. He said the woman's brother owes. There's no brother. I know there's no brother. Dominic's voice cracked on it. I know. Nobody watches a debt for 8 days from a school fence, boss. I ain't stupid. You don't ask Victor twice. You know you don't ask Victor twice. You ask me. That's the arrangement. You've always been able to ask me. Yeah. Dominic looked at him, wet, terrified, and something else underneath it that Damien didn't like at all. Sure, except everybody's been asking you for 4 months and you've been giving out Mondays. Damien let go of him. The rain came down on both of them. Up the street, a woman pulled a shopping cart across a driveway. The laundromat vent breathed hot lint smell out into the cold. Phone, Damien said. Dominic handed it over without a word. Damien scrolled it standing in the street, water dropping off his hair onto the screen. 14 messages from a number saved as V. Anything? She home? Stay till the light's on. Don't let her clock you again. She made Rennie Tuesday. And then, from 6 days ago, count the kids every time. Both of them. Every time. Damien read that one 3 times. Something moved in him then that had nothing to do with strategy, and he had to stand very still and let it pass, the way you stand still in a room with a live wire on the floor. He put the phone in his pocket. Get in the van, he said. Dominic's face went the color of the sky. Boss, not for that. Damien wiped the rain off his mouth with the back of his hand. You're going to drive to the lot on Aldous, and you're going to park that thing, and you're going to walk home, and you're going to sit in your kitchen. You don't call him. You don't text him. He calls you. You don't pick up. You do that for 48 hours, and I forget you sat outside of school. He's going to know. He's going to know by dinner. That's not your problem anymore. Dominic got in. He got the door half shut and stopped. Boss. His hands were on the wheel and shaking. The little boy. He's got your... Drive. The van pulled away. Damien stood in the street until his heart came down out of his throat. Then he walked to the corner of Holloway and looked up it, and there was nothing there but wet parked cars and a woman gone. The restaurant on Delcourt didn't open until 5, which meant at 4:40 there were exactly 3 people inside it. A cook, a kid mopping, and Victor Soren at the back table with a plate of bread and oil and a glass of red wine. Damien came through the front in a soaked coat with his hair flat to his skull. The kid with the mop looked up once and then found something to do in the kitchen. The cook went with him. Victor didn't stand. He tore a piece of bread. You look like a drowned dog. Damien put Dominic Farrow's phone on the table, face up, screen lit, the thread open. Victor looked at it for a long moment without touching it. Then he ate the bread. Okay, he said. That's it? Okay. You want me to do a performance? I've known you 22 years, Damien. I know what your face does when the answer doesn't matter. He picked up the wine. Sit down. You're making the room weird. Damien sat because standing was the thing a man did when he hadn't decided. And he had decided a while ago that Victor was going to have to be handled in a way that didn't happen in the front room of a restaurant with a kid mopping in the back. 8 days, Damien said. 26 months. The room went very quiet. Victor set the glass down and turned it a half turn on the cloth. You want to hear it? Or you want to keep doing the eyes? Talk. 4 years ago, you got weird. 2 weeks straight, you're a ghost. You're not eating. You're canceling with the Delano people. And then all of a sudden, you're back and you're the coldest I ever saw you. And Kessler's brother goes in the river for basically nothing. And everybody says boss had a bad month. Victor shrugged one shoulder. I don't say that. I go look. I find a nurse on Riverbend. Then I find the nurse is gone. 9 hours notice. Sold her furniture. You looked into my life. I looked into a hole in the middle of my boss's life that anybody with a phone could have fallen into. Victor leaned forward on his forearms. That's my job, Damien. That is the actual job description. You want to know how many guys I've cleared out of this thing before they got near you? You never asked. You never had to ask, because I did it in a hallway like a good soldier. 26 months ago, you sent someone to try her door at 4 in the morning. Victor's face didn't move, which was answer enough. That wasn't a try, he said. If it was a try, she'd have been in a car. That was me confirming there were 2 beds in the second bedroom. Damien's hands were flat on the table. He was aware of them the way you're aware of somebody else's hands. Say the rest. There's no rest. I confirmed it, and I sat on it, and I never told you, and I never told anybody else. And if you want to know why, it's because I've had a loaded gun in my desk drawer for 26 months, and I never once picked it up. Victor spread his hands. Somebody was going to find them eventually. Better it's the man who bleeds for you. That's the whole story. You wanted them counted. Every time. Both of them. Because if one of them goes missing on a Tuesday, I need to know it happened Tuesday and not Friday. Victor's jaw flexed. You think I want anything to happen to 2 kids? I think you want a leash. Victor smiled then, and it was a warm, tired, genuine-looking smile, and it made the hair come up on Damien's arms. That's not fair, Victor said quietly. Nothing about this is fair. That's why we're both still sitting down. They looked at each other, 22 years across a paper tablecloth. The dishwasher kicked on somewhere behind the wall and thudded. Here's what happens, Damien said. Nobody goes near that street. Not you, not Rennie, not anybody who's ever taken $1 out of my hand. The file you've got, the photographs, the school, whatever's in that drawer, comes to me tonight. All of it. Paper, cards, everything. Done. You said that fast. Because it's done. Victor picked up the bread again, tore it, dipped it. You want a war over something I've been protecting? I'm 41. I got a bad shoulder and a hole in my gut from the last one. He ate. But you should hear the other half, and you're not going to like the mouth it comes out of. Say it. You've got about 9 days. Victor chewed, swallowed, wiped his fingers on the cloth. The Delano thing's been hanging since March. Kessler's still walking around with a story about how he tested you and nothing happened. 3 of your own crews took a vote at a card game last Thursday. An actual vote, Damien, on whether you're still good for it. And I broke it up, and I put a guy's head through a wall so it wouldn't get back to you. And now here I am telling you anyway. He picked up the wine. The second anybody figures out what you've been doing with your Fridays, those kids stop being kids. They turn into the reason, and every man at that table starts running numbers on how much a 6-year-old is worth. Damien didn't move. Move. That's not a threat, Victor said. You want to hear a threat? I'll do one. I'm good at it. That's a weather report. Get me the file. Tonight. Damien stood. At the edge of the room he stopped, one hand on the back of an empty chair. Victor. Yeah. If I ever find out you looked at that boy's face and did arithmetic, Damien said, I'm going to do it slow, and I'm going to do it in front of your mother. Victor raised his glass an inch off the cloth in something that wasn't quite a toast. Wouldn't expect less, he said. Lena had the duffel out of the closet before their coats were off. We're not going anywhere, Mira said from the doorway, in the voice of a person delivering a legal ruling. Get your library book, the blue one and the one with the horse. Mom. Blue one and the horse, Mira. She was moving on the balls of her feet the way she'd trained herself to, hitting the bathroom first because that was the drawer people forgot, sweeping the shelf into a plastic bag with her forearm. Toothbrushes. The inhaler. The little bottle of pink stuff for Mira's ears. She had done this in 2 other cities and once in the middle of a night, and her hands knew the order. Noah stood in the middle of the kitchen and didn't move. Bug, bag, now. Was it the car? Lena's arm stopped over the plastic bag. Was it the man in the car? Noah said. She came out of the bathroom. He was standing with his fists closed at his sides, socked feet, chin up, and there was a thing in his face that she had spent 6 years praying she wouldn't see there, and had known she would. There's a leak in the building, she said. We're going to Ruthie's for a few days while they... You always say a leak. Noah. You said a leak in the old place too, and then we never went back, and you said the school made a mistake with my name, and then it wasn't my name anymore. He was breathing fast, high in his chest. I'm not a baby. I know you're not. Not. Then say a true thing. The dryers thudded downstairs. Somewhere out on Cranby, a car alarm went off and stopped. Lena crossed the kitchen and went down on her knees in front of him and put her hands on his arms and felt him shaking under the sweatshirt. A true thing, she said. Okay. Before you were born, I knew a man. He was a hard person in a hard job, and there are people who would hurt him if they could, and they can't get to him, so they'd go looking for something smaller. She held his eyes and made herself not blink. That's you. That's the whole reason for the boxes and the names and the leaks. Not because you did anything, because of him. Noah didn't ask the question. He looked at her and she watched him not ask it, and it was so much worse than if he had. Is he the one in the car? He said. I don't know. Mom. I don't know, Noah, and that's a true thing too. Her voice came apart in the middle of it, and she let it. Get the horse book. Somebody knocked on the door. Every muscle in Lena's body locked. 3 locks. She had 3 locks and a chair under the knob at night, and a fire escape she'd stood on with a bathroom scale to be sure, and none of it mattered. None of it had ever mattered, because a knock at 4:50 in the afternoon meant somebody had already climbed 4 flights knowing exactly which door. She stood up. She got both kids behind her with one arm, walking them backward toward the bedroom. Lena. The voice came through the door, low and flat, and she knew it the way you know a smell from a house you lived in as a child. Lena, it's me. I'm alone. There's nobody on the stairs and nobody at the bottom. Mira looked up. Who is? Bedroom, both of you. Close the door and get in the closet and don't come out till I say your whole name. Mom's whole name, Mira. The bedroom door shut. Lena stood in the middle of her kitchen with her heart going like a fist on a table, and she looked at the knife block, and she looked at the phone, and then she did the stupidest thing she had done in 4 years, which was walk to the door and open all 3 locks. He filled the frame. Soaked to the bone, coat black with rain, hair flat, and his face, she had built a very specific version of that face over 4 years, a face carved out of granite that had told her she was a mistake in a flat voice. And this wasn't it. This one looked like it hadn't slept in a week. Hi, Damien said. She hit him. Open hand, all shoulder, hard enough that his head turned and a bloom of red came up on his cheekbone. He didn't lift a hand. He turned his face back and looked at her. Okay, he said. 4 years? I know. 4 years and you come up my stairs like a guy returning a casserole dish. Her whole body was shaking. She could hear her own breath. How? I had you found. You had me. You had me found. Lena, do you know what I did to not be found? Her voice went to a place it hadn't been in years, and she didn't care who in the building heard it. I sold my mother's ring. I gave up a license I bled for. I have wiped other people's fathers for $11 an hour with a nursing degree in a box under a bed. I moved those kids 4 times. 4. Mira had a friend named Josie, and she cried for 6 weeks, and I told her Josie moved away. She was crying now, furious about it, not wiping it. And you found me in what, a day? 31 hours. She laughed. It came out horrible. 31 hours, she said. God. Okay. So all I ever had to do was matter to you. That landed somewhere behind his eyes, and she watched it land. Say the thing you came to say, she said. Then get out of my hallway. Somebody's been looking for you for 2.5 years. Lena's face didn't change, but her hand came off the door. The door at 4 in the morning in Cormac, Damien said. The man at the bus stop who asked you if you had children. That wasn't a stranger, and it wasn't luck. Who? Mine. His jaw worked. One of mine. My second. He's had eyes on this street for 8 days, and he's known about them for 26 months. She put her back against the doorframe like the floor had shifted. 26 months, she said. Yes. 26 months, and nobody touched us. That's right. You know what that means. Her eyes came up, and there was nothing soft in them at all. That means he was saving it. You don't sit on something for 2 years to be nice. He was waiting for the day it would be worth the most, and now you're standing in my doorway, so I guess today's the day the price went up. Damien said nothing. Get out. Lena. Get out of my hallway, get out of my building, and go be somebody else's disaster. There's a van on this street 4 days out of 7, he said. You go out that door tonight with a duffel bag. You get 9 blocks, maybe 11. And then you're on a road at night with 2 kids and no plates that mean anything, and I can't put a single man near you without putting a flag on you. He didn't move from where he stood. I've done the math 40 ways since 2 o'clock. There's one where they live. It's the one where you hate me and let me stand here anyway. From the other side of the apartment, very small, a voice said, Mom? Lena's eyes closed. You have 30 seconds, she said. That's not enough. It's what there is. Then here's the whole thing in 30. Damien's voice dropped. I didn't know. I would have said that 4 years ago if you'd told me, and I know why you didn't, and you were right not to. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm not asking to come in. Tonight there's a car at the corner of Holloway with a woman driving it. A woman, not one of mine, 61 years old. She's the mother of a man I'd trust with my life, and she doesn't know your name and never will. You get in it with them. It goes to a house in Ellery with a fence and no history on any paper anywhere. You stay a week. In a week I will have taken the man who's been counting your children off this earth, and after that you can spit in my face and disappear, and I will never look for you again as long as I live. That's the offer. That's all of it. The stairwell light buzzed and flickered. And if I say no, Lena said, then I sit in a car on this street myself, every night, until somebody comes. He shrugged, barely. It's a worse plan, but it's the one I run. She looked at him for a long time. Behind her, the bedroom door opened 4 inches, and a boy in socks stepped into the gap and stopped. Damien saw him, and his whole body went still. Not the stillness of a man being careful, the stillness of a man taking a hit in the chest and not letting it show. Noah looked at the man in the doorway. He looked at his mother's face. He looked back. Nobody said anything for 4 full seconds. Then Noah said, "You were in the car." Damien's throat moved. "Yeah," he said, "I was in the car." "Okay," Noah said, and closed the door. Lena put both hands over her mouth and stood in her own kitchen and made no sound at all. "Holloway," Damien said, "silver hatchback, 9 o'clock. Bring nothing you'd be sad to lose." He went down the stairs. Celeste met Victor at a wine bar on the west side that had a private room in the back, and she was 20 minutes early, and she'd already ordered. He came in at 7:40 in a good coat and sat down across from her and looked at her for a while before he said anything. "You look like a woman about to do something." "I've done it," Celeste said. "I'm here to tell you what." She put the photograph on the table between them, face up, sun faded on one edge. 2 people on a fire escape, a bottle, a bare foot hooked over an ankle. Victor picked it up. He looked at it a long time, and something crossed his face that in another life might have been sadness. "Where?" "A book on his shelf, Marine Engineering, Cracked Spine, second from the left." She turned her glass on the tablecloth. "He's had it there the entire time we've been together. He put it in there and never opened it and never threw it out. That's not a keepsake. That's a man leaving a hand in a fire to remind himself it's hot. You know who she is? Her name is Lena. He said it in his sleep 3 times in 8 months, and I never asked." Celeste's face was perfectly calm. "There are children, too. I don't know their names." "Noah and Mira," Victor said. 6. Celeste took that the way she took everything. A slow blink, a small adjustment of the glass. "So you already knew," she said. "I've known for 2 years. And you're still sitting here." "I'm sitting here because this afternoon my boss put a phone on a table in front of me, and I got to spend 20 minutes explaining myself in my own restaurant." Victor set the photograph down. 22 years. I've been shot for that man, and today he looked at me like I was something he found in the drain." The waiter came in. Victor waved him back out without looking at him. "So here's my question for you, Miss Moreau, and I'd like a real answer." He leaned back. "Which one are you? The one who wants him back, or the one who wants what she was promised?" Celeste didn't hesitate for even a fraction of a second. "I don't want a man who looks like that in a photograph," she said. "I've never wanted that. I want 400 people to stand up when I walk into a room, and I want my father to stop treating me like a shipping license with hair, and I want to be married to whoever's actually running this city." She sipped her wine. Damien was the answer to that question in November. He may not be the answer to it in June. Victor laughed once, short, surprised. "You're a piece of work." "I'm a Moreau." She set the glass down. "So, what's in that drawer of yours?" "Everything," Victor said. "School registration, 2 addresses, her cash pattern, a pediatric license she stopped using 4 years ago, and a P.O. box under a name she made up." He turned the photograph face down with one finger. "He asked me tonight to hand all of it over. Paper, cards, everything." "And will you?" "I'll hand over a file." Celeste smiled for the first time all evening, and it was a small, cold, well-bred smile, and it did not touch her eyes. "Then I'll keep wearing the ring," she said. At 9 o'clock, a silver hatchback idled at the corner of Holloway with an old woman behind the wheel listening to a call-in show, and a woman in a gray coat came around the corner with a duffel and 2 children and got in, and the car pulled away. At 9:40, Damien Viscari walked into the back room of the restaurant on Delcourt, where 11 men were eating. He didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table and waited until every fork went down, and the room went to that particular kind of silence, and Victor Sorin, at his right hand, laid his napkin beside his plate. "There's a thing you're all going to hear in a week or a month," Damien said, "and I'd rather it came out of my mouth than out of a rumor at a card game." He took the gun off his hip and set it on the tablecloth, barrel toward himself, and left his hand off it. "I have 2 children," he said. "They're 6 years old. Their mother's name is not going to be said in this room, tonight or ever." Nobody moved. Somewhere a chair leg creaked. "So that nobody has to wonder," Damien said, "here's the arrangement. Anyone who looks for them loses everything he has and everyone he loves, and then he goes in the water. Anyone who's already looked has until the end of this dinner to say so and walk out breathing." He looked around the table, face by face, and let it sit. "That's it," he said. "Eat." Men picked up forks with hands that didn't work right. And at Damien's right, Victor Sorin reached for the wine and poured himself a careful half glass. And under the noise of the room, he let out a slow breath through his nose and thought, there it is. 22 years, and the man had just laid his own throat on the table in front of 11 witnesses, and there was no taking it back. Not tomorrow, not ever. Victor drank. Victor got the file to him at 11:40 that same night, and that was the first thing that felt wrong. It came in a supermarket bag, which was Victor all over. A manila envelope in a plastic sack with a receipt still in the bottom of it, handed off at a gas station on Colwell by a kid who didn't know what he was carrying. Damien opened it in the car with the dome light off, working by streetlight. It was all there. 2 addresses, the one in Cormac and the one on Cranby. 4 photographs shot long lens through a chain fence, one of Lena at the corner in the gray coat, one of Mira on a swing with her mouth open, 2 of the boy. A photocopy of the enrollment card. A page of Victor's handwriting, block capitals, listing the shifts. Home care, Tuesday through Friday overnight, wholesale Saturday and Sunday, office floors Wednesday. A copy of the P.O. Box application with the false name on it. 11 pages, clipped, ordered, complete. Damien sat with it on his knees for a long time. 22 years of watching Victor Sorin hand things over, and every single time there'd been something held back. A name, a number, a little piece kept in the pocket for later, because that was how Victor breathed. Damien had always known it and had always let it go, the way you let a good dog keep a bone. There was nothing held back in this envelope. It was too clean. It was a room somebody had swept before he walked in. He drove out to Ellery at 1 in the morning with the file on the passenger seat and his hands wrong on the wheel. The house sat at the end of a gravel road with a fence around 3 acres and a stand of black pines behind it, and it had belonged on paper to a dead man's estate for 9 years. Damien had bought it in a name so buried that even Krauss hadn't found it. When Krauss had gone looking for buried things on his behalf, which was the only reason he'd used it, Rosalie Tyrone opened the door in a cardigan with a paring knife in her hand and lowered it when she saw who it was. "They're asleep," she said. "All 3. "She sleep?" She lay down at 11 with her shoes on and her hand on the girl's back. Rosalie stepped aside. "That's not sleeping. That's waiting." Damien came into the kitchen. There were 2 plates in the drainer and a glass with cartoon fish on it that Rosalie must have found in a cupboard from some other decade, and a duffel bag by the door still zipped because a woman who's run 4 times doesn't unpack. Lena was in this doorway of the back hall. She'd heard the car. Of course she'd heard the car. "Rosalie," she said without looking away from him, "would you check on Mira?" "Mira's fine." "Would you check on her anyway?" Rosalie put the paring knife on the counter and went. They stood in a kitchen with a bad overhead light, 12 feet apart, and neither of them sat down. "You said a week," Lena said. "I did." "It's been 6 hours and you're at the door. That's how a week starts?" "I needed to see the road in." Damien put his keys on the counter. "There's one way in and it's gravel for a quarter mile. You hear anybody coming for 40 seconds before they get here. 40 seconds is a lot. 40 seconds is nothing." It's enough to get 2 kids through the back fence and into the pines. Lena laughed, one hard breath through her nose. Listen to us. Yeah. This is a conversation about how many seconds my children get. She crossed her arms and gripped her own elbows. They ate boxed macaroni tonight in a stranger's kitchen, and Mira asked if this was our new house, and I said no. And she said good, because there's no bathtub upstairs. Damien's mouth moved, almost. There's one downstairs, he said. I know. I found it. She looked at the floor. Noah hasn't said 11 words since we got in the car. The refrigerator cycled on and hummed. He's like that when he's working something out, she said, quieter. He goes away for a couple days and then he comes back with a question you can't answer. That's how it's been since he was 3. Damien didn't say that's what I do. He didn't have to. She heard it anyway, and her face closed. Don't, she said. I didn't. You were going to. I was going to. Lena went to the sink and turned the tap and shut it off again without filling anything, just to have her back to him for a second. I need you to know something, and then I need you to go, she said. 4 years ago, you stood in my kitchen and you told me I was a mistake. I remember what I said. Do you? Because I can do it word for word. I've had a long time to practice. She turned around. Her eyes were dry and terrible. You said, this was a stupid thing I did and it's finished, and one day you'll understand I did you a favor. And I stood there with my hand on a chair, and I had 11 weeks of morning sickness behind me and 2 heartbeats on a printout in my coat pocket, and I decided in about 4 seconds not to say a word about it. And I've been asked by exactly nobody, ever, whether that was the right call, so I've just been asking myself, every night, for 6 years. Damien stood very still. It was the right call, he said. Don't you dare absolve me. I'm not absolving you. I'm agreeing with you. His voice had gone to a place it didn't usually go. If you'd told me that night, I'd have kept you. I'd have put you in a house with men outside it, and I'd have told myself that was love, and a year later somebody would have taken the 3 of you off a driveway to get a shipping route back from me. He shook his head once. You did the only thing that worked. I've had 4 days to look for another version, and there isn't one. Lena's chin moved. She pressed her lips together hard. I hate that you're saying this now, she said. I know. 4 years I've had a very useful picture of you in my head, and you're standing in this kitchen wrecking it. I'm not asking you to change the picture. Then what are you asking? Nothing, Damien said. I told you, nothing. Down the hall, a floorboard shifted. They both looked. Noah stood at the mouth of the hallway in a borrowed t-shirt 3 sizes too big, barefoot on cold linoleum, hair flat on one side. Bug, Lena said. It's 2 in the morning. Noah looked at Damien. He came 4 steps into the kitchen, stopped, and folded his arms across his chest. And the gesture was so exactly Damien's own that Lena made a small sound and turned her face away. Are you the reason? Noah said. Damien crouched. Not close. 8 feet off, down on one knee by a kitchen chair so his eyes were level with the kids. Yeah, he said. I'm the reason. For all of it? For all of it. Noah's jaw set. His breathing came faster. Mira cried in the car. She thinks it's because of the leak. She keeps saying when the leak's fixed. I know. I'm not going to tell her. That's up to you. It's not up to me. Nothing's up to me. The boy's voice cracked and he was furious about it, wiping his face with the heel of his hand, 6 years old and standing there like a man who'd lost a case. You should have stayed away. Probably. Then why didn't you? Damien didn't reach for him. Every part of him wanted to, and he understood with total clarity that if he did it, he would be doing it for himself. Because a bad man was counting you, he said. Every day, twice a day, when you went in and when you came out. And I found out on Friday, and once I found out, there was no version of me that could go home and have dinner. Noah stared at him. Okay, he said. He went back down the hall. The door shut. Lena stood at the sink with both hands on the edge of it and her head down and her shoulders going silently, the way a person cries when they've had 6 years of practice at doing it quietly in a small apartment. Damien stood up. He got as far as putting his hand flat on the counter beside hers, not touching her, close enough that she could feel the heat of it. 8 days, he said. Not 7. 8. Then it's done, and you never see me again. Don't promise me things. That one I can do. He put it together over the next 30 hours, the way he put everything together. Slowly, once. Aldous Street. the Fleet Lot. Thursday night, when Victor did the transport books in the office with 2 men and a space heater. 4 of Damien's own, hand-picked, Marco, the Bello brothers, and a quiet man named Fitch, who'd been with him since the beginning. He briefed them separately, one at a time, in cars, and none of them knew the other 3 existed. He gave nobody the reason. He never gave anybody the reason. Wednesday afternoon, he called Kraus. "I want a location on Victor Soren for Thursday between 8 and midnight," he said. "Confirmed, not assumed." There was the smallest pause on the line. A quarter second. Later, Damien would take that quarter second apart the way a man takes apart a watch. "That's a different kind of job than I do for you," Kraus said. "It's the same job. Find a man." "Sure." "Papers." "I'll have it tonight." "Emile." "Yeah." "You said something to me in a parking garage about addresses you still think about." Another pause. Longer this time. "I did," Kraus said. "You've never once told me who they were." "No," Kraus said. "I never have." Thursday night at 8:40, Damien Vescari walked into the Fleet Lot on Aldous and knew inside 4 steps. It was the lights. The office lights were on, and the space heater was going. He could see the orange bar of it through the window glass. And there were 3 cars parked out front instead of 2, and the gate had been open. The gate was never open. Marco was at his shoulder. Fitch was 30 feet back at the corner of the maintenance bay. The Bello brothers were somewhere out past the fence line where they were supposed to be. "Boss," Marco said. "Gate." "I see the gate." "You want to pull off?" Damien stood in the middle of the lot with his hand inside his coat, 40 feet of wet asphalt between him and the office door. And every instinct he had built over 22 years said, "Leave." And something else in him, something newer, uglier, 4 days old and screaming, said, "He's in there. End it tonight. Go home to Ellery clean." He went to the door. He put his shoulder through it and came in with the gun up, and there were 3 men in that office, and not one of them was Victor Soren. 2 of them were Damien's own. Rennie Salvo, sitting on the desk, a kid named Pappas by the filing cabinets. And in the chair behind the desk, in a good coat, with his hands folded on the blotter like a man waiting for a dentist, was Emile Kraus. Nobody had a weapon out. That was the part Damien never forgot. Nobody drew. Because nobody needed to. "Put it down, Mr. Vescari," Kraus said. "There's nothing in this room to shoot." Marco came through the door behind him and stopped dead. "The hell is this?" "Where is he?" Damien said. "He's at a restaurant on the west side having veal with your fiancée and 11 witnesses, and he has been since 7:50. Kraus's hands didn't move on the blotter. "He'll be there until 11. It's a very good alibi, and it cost him $140. Damien's gun stayed up. The muzzle didn't shake, which surprised him. 26 months, he said. 29. Say it out loud. "He came to me 29 months ago." Kraus said it evenly, like a man reading a chart. "He didn't threaten me. I want you to understand that because I think you'll assume it. He offered me money, and I took it, and then 11 months in, he showed me photographs of my daughter's front door in Hallam, and after that, the money was just paperwork. You found her for him. I found her for him in Cormac, and in Delaney, and I told him about the P.O. box and the license she wouldn't use." Kraus finally looked up, and his eyes were the tired eyes of a retired schoolteacher, and there was nothing in them at all. "And then last Sunday morning, you called me at 6 o'clock and asked me to find her, and I already had the file in my hand, Mr. Vescari. I'd had it for 2 years. I sat on the phone with you, and I did a very good impression of a man starting from nothing." Something in Damien's chest went out from under him. 31 hours, he said. "I made you wait 31 hours so you wouldn't ask how. You sat in my car." Damien's voice came out of somewhere below his own ear. "You looked at a photograph of a 6-year-old and you gave me a lecture about the 11 people you still think about." That part was true. Kraus's hands finally came apart. He laid them flat. "That's the only honest thing I've said to you in 2.5 years, and I'd like it on the record." "Boss." Marco's voice was very tight. "Boss. Rennie." Rennie Salvo hadn't moved off the desk. I was a thick, slow, 40-year-old man who had driven Damien's mother to a hospital in a snowstorm 11 years ago, and who now sat on a desk in a heated office with his hands loose between his knees and would not raise his eyes off the floor. "Rennie," Damien said. Don't, Rennie said. Look at me. Boss, don't make me. Look at me. Rennie looked up. His face was wet. Sunday night, he said, at the table. When you put the gun down and you said you had kids. He swallowed. 22 guys heard it inside a day. And every one of them did the same math, boss. Every single one. A man with kids can be moved. A man with kids says no to Delano and yes to whoever's holding them. He wiped his mouth. You went and told a room full of thieves exactly where your throat was. That was to protect them. I know it was. Rennie's voice broke. That's what makes it the worst thing I ever watched a man do. Damien lowered the gun 2 inches. He recorded it, he said. Krause nodded once. Papa's had a phone in his jacket. It's been to the Delano people, to Kessler, and to 2 men in this city whose names you'd rather I didn't say in front of your driver, along with a photograph of a boy with your eyes and a school address you personally confirmed by standing across the street from it in the rain on Friday, which, I'd like to be clear, was the part I couldn't have done for him. You did that one yourself. Marco said, Boss, we should go. 3 crews took a vote, Damien said. They took another one Tuesday, Krause said. It went the other way. The space heater ticked. Rain moved across the roof of the office in a long, soft rush. Where are the Bellows? Damien said. Nobody answered him. Where are the Bellow brothers, Emile? They were paid on Monday, Krause said. By me. In your name, out of an account you gave me, which I would like you to think about for a minute, because it's going to matter later. Damien turned and went out the door. He crossed 40 feet of asphalt in about 9 seconds, and Marco was shouting something behind him, and he had the car door open and the phone against his ear before he was sitting down. Rosalie Tyrone's phone rang 4 times and went to a recording of a woman's voice saying she couldn't come to the phone. He called it again, 4 rings. Boss? Marco fell into the passenger seat as the car was already moving. Boss, where are we? Ellery. That's 40 minutes. Not tonight, it isn't. It was 26. The gravel road came up in the headlights, and Damien saw the gate standing open at the top of it and put his foot down. And the car came up that quarter-mile throwing stones, and the house had every light on, downstairs and up, every window, which was the single most wrong thing he had ever seen. The front door was open 8 inches. He went in with the gun up, and Marco 3 steps behind him, and the whole world reduced down to a strip about 4 feet wide. Kitchen. 2 plates in the drainer, the glass with the cartoon fish knocked over on the counter, water still running out of it onto the linoleum in a slow spreading sheet. A chair on its side. The paring knife on the floor by the stove and a smear on the tile beside it, 6 inches long, dark. Rosalie Tyrone was sitting on the floor with her back against the cabinets and her legs out in front of her, 1 shoe off, holding a dish towel against the side of her head. She was alive. Her eyes tracked him. Her mouth was moving. Marco went down on his knees in the water and said, Ma, 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 look at me. They came up through the pines, Rosalie said. She sounded almost annoyed, which was somehow the worst part. Not the road. The road was for show. I heard the road, and I got them into the hall, like she said, and they came in the back. How many? Damien said. 5. Maybe 6. She pressed the towel harder. She fought them. That girl fought them. She got one of them across the face with, I don't know what she had. She was screaming for the boy to run, and he wouldn't. He wouldn't run. He came back for the little one, and one of them picked him up like a bag of... Damien went down the hall. The bedroom door was off 1 hinge. The bunk was stripped and the mattress half off the frame, and there was a yellow raincoat on the floor with the sleeve inside out. He stood in that room for 4 seconds. Then he walked back down the hall, past Marco and his mother, out the front door into the rain, and he stood in the gravel with his hands loose at his sides and the whole night ringing in his ears. And he could hear himself breathing, in and out, too fast, like an animal in a small space, and he could not make it slow down. His phone rang in his coat. Unknown number. He got it to his ear on the 2nd ring and said nothing. Don't talk, Victor Soren said. Just breathe. I can hear you doing it. Damien said nothing. They're fine. Nobody's hurt. The girl's got a scraped elbow from the fence, and the boy bit Tomas hard enough to break skin, which, I'll be honest with you, that was the highlight of my night. Cars in the background, a door closing. The mother's got a fat lip and she gave it back twice, so we're square. Victor. I said don't talk. Not angry. Almost gentle. You're going to want to do the voice, the flat one. I've heard it for 22 years and it doesn't work on me, so save it, because I've got 4 things to say, and then I'm hanging up. 1. Anselm Harbor. The old container yard past Pier 19, the one you bought in 19 and never used. Sunday night, midnight. You know why Sunday? That's when the Delano people fly out, and they'd like to be gone before this happens. 2. You come alone. Not alone like you mean it. Alone like nobody else is on that property. Marco stays home. Fitch stays home. If I see one car on Anselm Road that isn't yours, I stop counting to 2. 3. You bring the books. All of them. Every ledger, every account number, the offshore structure, the 4 names in the department, the pier licenses. In a case, in your hand, and you bring your seat. You sign it over in front of witnesses, out loud. So 20 men hear a boss hand a thing to a man instead of losing it. I want the clean version. I've earned the clean version. Damien stood in the rain. And 4, Victor said. The rain filled the silence. 4, Victor said again, and something in his voice changed, went thinner, went almost human. 22 years, Damien, 9 hours in a chair outside a room. I know. I've thought about that chair every day this week, and I want you to understand that it's not nothing to me, and that if there had been any other way to get out from under you, I'd have taken it, because I'm not built to be the guy who does this. You're going to die on Sunday, Damien said. Yeah, maybe. Victor let out a breath. But here's the thing you've never understood about me, boss, so listen. I don't want your money, and I don't want your city. I want to stop being a man who has to ask permission. Wind on the line. You made me into somebody who spent 22 years standing in hallways, so I'm taking the room. If you touch them, I'm not going to touch them. That's the whole point. If I touch them, I've got nothing. A car door. Sunday, midnight. Books in your hand, seat off your back, nobody on the road. Let me talk to her. There was a pause. Then a rustle, and the sound of a phone changing hands, and Lena's voice came on, close and hard and out of breath, and she got exactly 9 words out. Damien, don't come. They're going to kill you. The line went dead. He stood in the gravel with the phone still at his ear for a long time. Behind him, in the lit doorway, Marco said his name twice. Damien turned around. In the rectangle of yellow light, his face looked like something carved out of a rock face. And Marco, who had worked for him for 19 years, took an involuntary step backward. I need 3 things, Damien said. Boss, get your mother to Halloran, the private one, pay cash, no name. Damien walked past him into the house, into the kitchen with the water spreading over the floor, and picked up the yellow raincoat off the hall floor on the way and stood holding it in one fist. Then find me a phone that's never touched this organization. That's 2. What's the 3rd? Damien looked at the coat in his hand. Get me the number for the federal building, he said. The federal building had a coffee shop on the ground floor that opened at 6. And at 6:10 on Friday morning, a woman in a gray suit sat down across from Damien Viscari with a paper cup and didn't take the lid off. Her name was Adrienne Vosloo. She was 50. She had a bad knee she didn't hide, and she had been working organized crime in that city for 19 years, 11 of them with a photograph of Damien on a wall in a room with no windows. You understand I'm not alone, she said. There are 4 people in the parking structure and a 5th one at the counter behind you pretending she can't work her phone. I counted 6. Then you're better than my budget. She turned the cup a half turn on the table. Say it fast. I've been awake since your call, and I've got a supervisor who thinks this is a trap. It's not a trap. That's what a trap sounds like. Damien put a flash drive on the table between them. He didn't slide it. He set it down and took his hand off it. Vosloo looked at it for a long moment. What's on it? Pier 19, 11 years of manifests, 4 shell companies, the transfer structure through 2 banks offshore, and the names of 3 men in the Port Authority and 1 in your building. He watched her face. That's about 8% of what I have. 8%. It's the 8% that doesn't have my signature on it. She laughed once, ugly and tired. There it is. You'll want to plug that in before we go any further, because I'm about to ask you for something, and you're going to want to know what it's worth. I know what it's worth. She still hadn't touched it. What I don't know is why a man who has beaten me for 11 years is sitting in a coffee shop at 6 in the morning looking like he slept in a car. I slept in a car. Why? Damien didn't answer for a while. Outside the glass, the street was empty and gray, and a man was hosing down the sidewalk in front of a shuttered deli. Sunday at midnight, there's going to be a meeting at the old container yard at Anselm Harbor, he said. Past Pier 19. I own it. There'll be somewhere between 18 and 25 men on that property, and every one of them has done something you'd like to charge him with. My second is going to be there. 2 men out of the Delano organization are going to be there as witnesses because he wants it clean in public. Vosloo's hand finally moved. She put one finger on the flash drive. And you want us where? On the water, not on Anselm Road, Dirk. There's one way in and he'll have it watched from the crane gantry. On the water, dark, engines off, half a mile out, and you don't move until you hear a shot. You want me to sit half a mile out in the dark and wait for gunfire? Yes, not happening. She leaned back. You know how many ways that ends with an agent dead and me testifying to a committee about why I trusted? There are 2 children on that property, Damien said. The coffee shop hummed. The woman at the counter behind them turned a page of something she wasn't reading. Vosloo's face didn't change, but something behind it did. Say that again? 6 years old, a boy and a girl, their mothers with them. They were taken out of a house in Ellery on Thursday night at about 9:15 by 5 men who came up through a tree line, and one of them put a woman named Rosalie Tyrone on a kitchen floor with a fractured orbital bone, and she's at Halloran under a name that isn't hers, and if you go and pull her chart, you'll find the intake nurse wrote Fall. Whose children? Damien looked at her. Ah, Vosloo said. Yeah. You have children. I found out on Tuesday of last week. She sat with that for a long moment. Then she took the lid off the coffee, finally, and drank some of it, and made a face at how bad it was. You know what my job is, she said. My job is to put you in a room for 25 years. That's not a personality thing, Viscari. That's a job. I've got a folder with your name on it that includes a man who came out of a settling tank at the Rennick plant in pieces small enough to fit through a grate. I know what's in the folder. And you're going to sit there and tell me about children. I'm going to sit here and tell you that on Sunday night there will be 20 men with weapons and 2 6-year-olds in the same square acre, and that I'm going to walk in there whether you're on the water or not, and the only question in front of you is whether anybody is left alive afterward to convict. He put his hands flat on the table. You want me? You've got me. I'm not asking for a deal. I'm not asking for a number of years. When it's finished, I'll walk out of that yard with my hands up, and you can do whatever you want with the rest of my life. I'll give you the other 92% with my signature on every page of it. In exchange for protection for the woman and the 2 kids, real protection, new paper, out of state, and nothing on any document anywhere with my name near theirs. You know I can't promise that at a table. Then go promise it somewhere else and call me by tonight. Vosloo picked up the flash drive and closed her fist around it. If one of my people gets hurt because of this, she said, there is no version where you get to be a father. That was never on the table, Damien said. I'm not trying to be their father. I'm trying to be the last mistake I ever cost them. They had put Lena and the twins in a container office at the north end of the yard, a corrugated box with a desk bolted to the floor, a window with a wire mesh grid over it, and a space heater that worked when the generator did. She spent the first 6 hours doing exactly one thing, learning it. 2 men on the door in shifts, change at 4 and at 10. The one called Tomas had a bandage on his forearm and wouldn't look at her. The other one, older, gray at the temples, brought a bag of chips at some point and set it on the desk without a word and left. The door opened outward. The hinges were on the outside. The mesh on the window was screwed, not welded, and the screws were painted over, which meant old, which meant maybe. She counted 41 steps of gravel between the office and the nearest stack of containers, because she'd counted them coming in with a hand in her hair. Mira slept most of Friday, which frightened Lena more than anything else. Noah didn't sleep at all. He sat on the floor with his back to the desk leg and his knees up, and he watched the door, and every time it opened, his whole body went tight and then loosened again. Bug. What? Come here. I'm okay here. Lena sat down on the floor beside him with her shoulder against his. Her lip had split on Thursday, and it had scabbed and cracked again, and she kept touching it with her tongue without meaning to. When it happens, she said, low, you take Mira and you go left out that door and you run for the containers and you do not look back and you do not wait for me. No. Noah. You said don't lie. His voice was flat. So don't. She closed her eyes. You go left, she said. You take her hand. You count containers and you go to the fourth stack, and you get down in the space between the bottom two, and you don't come out for anybody who doesn't say your whole name. Noah didn't say anything. Say it back to me. Left, fourth stack, bottom two. His jaw was going. You'll say my whole name? I'll say your whole name. The door opened at 4 in the afternoon and Victor Soren came in with a paper sack. He set it on the desk. Sandwiches, wrapped. A carton of chocolate milk, which he opened himself and put the straw in and set down in front of Mira, who had woken up and was sitting on the desk with her legs hanging. Eat the crust, he said. There's nothing else till tomorrow. I don't like the white bread, Mira said. Nobody does. That's why it's cheap. Mira, 6 years old and completely without judgment, said, Are you the bad man? Victor looked at her. Yeah, he said. Okay, said Mira, and drank the milk. Lena stood up. She put herself between the desk and Victor, and she was 5'5" and 11 pounds lighter than she'd been in March. And Victor Soren took a half step back without appearing to. They're not part of this, she said. They're all of this. Let's not do the speech. I want the speech. Her hands were shaking and she let them. You've had eyes on my kids for 2 years. You watched my daughter learn to ride a bike. You know what she names her stuffed animals, because you had a man on that street 8 days out of the last 10. So let's do the speech, Victor, because I want to hear how a person says it out loud. Victor's jaw moved. He'd have been dead by now, he said. What? You're Damien. 4 years ago when he went to pieces over you. I had 2 crews looking at him sideways within a month. Kessler was 3 weeks from moving. You know what I did? I put a man in the river and I told everybody the boss ordered it, and I ate that myself, and it held the line. He tapped 2 fingers on the desk. I have kept that man alive for 22 years, and he has never once said thank you in a way that didn't sound like a scheduling note. So no, there's no speech. There's just a bill. And my children are the bill. Your children are the receipt. He picked up the empty milk carton and crushed it in one hand. Sunday he signs, and they go home with you, and I never look at you again in my life. That's the whole deal. I'm not the thing under your bed, lady. I'm a guy who got tired. He went to the door. Victor. He stopped. He's going to kill you, Lena said. Probably. He put his hand on the frame. But I'm going to make him do it in front of everybody, and then there won't be a man left in this city who thinks he's anything but what he is. The door shut. The bolt went over. Behind Lena, very quietly, Mira said, Mommy, is Damien the man in the car? Saturday night, in the back of a body shop on 9th that had been closed since the flood, Damien Viscari laid out the property map of Anselm Harbor on the hood of a stripped sedan and put 4 fingers on it. Marco stood on one side, Fitch on the other. That was the whole army. 19, Fitch said. He was 60. He had a face like a hatchet, and he had never in 30 years raised his voice. Maybe 22. Rennie's with him, Papas, both Bellows, Tomas Reyes and his cousin. The rest are Delano muscle he's borrowed to look like a bigger man than he is. How many on the gantry? 2. One of them's a shooter, boss, actual shooter, not a guy with a rifle. Name's Boyko. He came in with the Delano people, and he was something in a different country before he was this. Damien moved his finger to the crane gantry on the map, then east, along the water. Line of sight from up there covers the whole yard except 2 places. The gap between the 4th and 5th container stacks and the loading dock apron under the overhang. That's if he stays on the gantry. He'll stay. Guys like that always think the height's the point. Marco hadn't said anything in 10 minutes. He had a bruise on the back of his hand from a wall he'd hit on Thursday, and he'd been standing there opening and closing that fist. Boss, he said, say the part you're not saying. Damien straightened up. Boss Lou's on the water with 2 boats, he said. They don't move until they hear a shot. It'll take them between 4 and 6 minutes from that point to be inside the fence. 4 to 6 minutes. Yeah. That's a long time to be in a yard with 19 guys. It is, Fitch said quietly. And the kids are in that time. They're in that time. Damien put both hands on the hood. So here's what we're doing. At 11:50, I go through the gate alone with the case, and everything in that case is exactly what he asked for, because he'll check. And if he catches me lying in the first 90 seconds, we all die in the first 90 seconds. Marco, you're on the water with Vosloo. Not because I want you there, because I need somebody on that boat who can tell them which shape in the dark is a 6-year-old. Marco's face went hard. No, that's not a request. 19 years. His voice cracked. 19 years, boss, and you're putting me in a boat? I'm putting you where my children's lives are. Damien didn't look up from the map. There are going to be men in the dark with rifles and a woman with a badge deciding what to shoot at. You are the only person on this earth who's going to be standing next to her when she decides. So yes, you're in the boat. Marco turned away and put his hands on the back of his head and stood like that. Fitch, Damien said, I know where I am. Where are you? North Fence, 10 o'clock, in the water up to my chest with a bag over my head, freezing to death for 2 hours like a man half my age. Fitch almost smiled. And at midnight, I'm in the gap between the 4th and 5th stack, and when it goes, I put the shooter off that gantry. You get one. I've only ever needed one. Damien folded the map. Last thing, he said. When Vosloo comes through that fence, every man in that yard is going to run for the water or the road. I'm not going to be running. He looked at both of them. I want that said in a room with witnesses. Nobody's dying to buy me a boat ride. When it's finished, I put my hands on my head and I walk out to them and I get in a car. And if either of you tries to make that go differently, I'll put you down myself. Nobody said anything. Fitch put out his hand. Damien took it. 22 years, boss, Fitch said. 30 for you. 31. Fitch picked up his coat. Never liked Victor? Never once. Told you in '08. You did. Just want it on the record. Sunday. 11:51. Anselm Harbor smelled like rust and diesel and the low green rot of standing water, and the fog had come in off the lake at 10 and never left. So the sodium lights up on the poles were just orange smears with nothing under them. Damien Viscari walked through the gate with a steel case in his left hand and both hands visible, gravel under his shoes, his own breathing loud in his own ears. He counted shapes as he came in, 6 along the fence, 4 by the trucks, 2 up on the gantry 100 feet in the air, 3 at the mouth of the warehouse. His shirt was already soaked through under the coat, and the night was 41 degrees. They came out to meet him in a loose half circle, and a man he'd known for 11 years patted him down and wouldn't meet his eye and took the gun off his hip and stepped back. There's a second one, the man said. Ankle. He took that too. Victor was standing under the overhang of the old loading dock with the light behind him, hands in his coat pockets. Rennie at his left, Papa's behind, and 2 men in good overcoats standing off to the side with the deliberate posture of people who had come to observe and not participate. The Delano witnesses, an older one and a younger one, both of them looking at Damien the way you look at a building coming down. You came alone, Victor said. You said alone. I did. I honestly didn't think you'd do it. Victor came off the dock and down 3 steps. Case. Damien held it out. Papas took it, laid it on the hood of a truck, opened it, and started going through it page by page with a flashlight in his teeth. Where are they? Damien said. They're fine. That's not what I asked. They're in the office and they're fine and you'll see them when we're done. Victor's face was drawn tight. He hadn't slept either. 22 years, and they were both standing in a container yard at midnight, looking like they'd been dug up. Don't rush this. This is the part I want. Papa said, ledgers are real, all 4 accounts. The names are here. Read one out. Which? Any of them. Out loud. So everybody hears it. Papas read a name. It was a name that had been on a placard on a desk in a government office for 9 years, and something moved through the men along the fence like wind through a field. Okay, Victor said quietly. Okay. Now the kids. Now the other thing. Victor turned in a slow half circle so the whole yard could see him. Out loud, Damien, in front of these men and these 2 gentlemen from out of state. You say it, and then you sign the page Papas has got, and then I open a door. Damien stood in the gravel with the fog moving past him. Say the words, Victor said. The seat's yours. Louder. The seat is yours. Damien's voice came out flat and carried across the whole yard. Everything on Pier 19, the transport, the licenses, the men, it's Victor Soren's. Anybody who takes an order from me after tonight is taking it from a private citizen. He walked to the truck hood and picked up the pen and signed a page he didn't read. And then a woman's voice came out of the dark behind the trucks and said, "There. Was that so hard?" Celeste Moreau came into the light in a camel coat and flat shoes she'd clearly bought for this, and she stopped about 8 feet from him with her hands in her pockets, and the ring was still on her finger. Damien looked at her for a long moment. "How long?" he said. "Since the party." She tilted her head. "Actually, that's not fair. Since the crosswalk. I didn't know what I'd found. I just knew I'd found something, and I've never once in my life found something and let it sit." "You went to him." "I texted him from your kitchen." She said it without any particular pride. "Damien, please don't do the wounded thing. It doesn't suit either of us. You didn't love me." "I never said I did." "No, you didn't." Something in her mouth tightened, just for a second, the first honest thing on her face all night. "And I never said it either, and I want you to understand that I'm not standing here because you broke my heart. You couldn't have. There was nothing to break. I'm standing here because I spent 8 months learning how a room works when you walk into it, and I liked it, and I'd like to keep it." She shrugged one shoulder. "You were the door. Victor's the door now. It was never about the man. It was about the room. You were going to marry me. I was going to marry the position. You were an accessory to it, and honestly a fairly difficult one. You never talked. You never touched me. You kept a photograph of another woman in a book on your shelf for 8 months, and you thought I hadn't seen it." She smiled, small and cold and perfectly composed. "I found it in the first 3 weeks. I put it back exactly where it was every time." "Celeste." "What?" "There are 2 children in that office." "Yes," she said, "and if they're anybody's problem, they're hers." She looked over at Victor, and something passed between them that was purely transactional and entirely mutual. "I'd like to go inside now. It's cold, and this is the part where men shoot each other." And that was when Damien saw the office door open at the north end of the yard, 140 feet away, and Lena come out of it with Thomas's hand on the back of her neck and both kids in front of her, and Mira crying, and Noah walking with his fists closed. Damien's whole body went to a single point. "Let them walk to me," he said. "After." "After what, Victor?" "You've got the seat. You've got the books. I just handed you my life in front of 19 men and 2 witnesses." He took a step forward, and 4 men along the fence moved at once. "There is nothing left. Let them walk." Victor looked at him, and for a second, a real second, one that Damien would take apart later 1,000 times, something in the man's face came loose. 22 years of hallways, and a hole in his gut, and a chair outside a room, all of it right there behind his eyes. "Yeah," Victor said. "Okay." He raised his hand and made a small circle with 2 fingers and 140 feet away. Tomas let go of Lena's neck and gave her a shove. She got 4 steps. Then a phone went off in Rennie Salvo's coat, loud, cheap, 3 ascending notes, and Rennie looked at it, and his face changed, and he said, Boss, water. There's boats on the..." The gantry lit up. One flat crack, enormous, rolling off the containers and the water and coming back, and the round went through the gravel 2 feet from Lena's foot and threw up a spray of stones. Everything came apart at once. Lena didn't freeze. Lena moved before the echo came back. She hit Mira sideways with her whole body and drove her down behind a container corner, and the second round went through the space where the girl's chest had been and punched a hole in a steel panel with a sound like a hammer on a bell. "Left!" Lena was screaming it, flat on the gravel with her arm over her daughter, blood coming out of her forearm where the stones had opened it. "Noah, left, 4th stack, go!" Damien was already running. He heard his own name in a voice he'd never heard use it, and he came around the truck at a dead sprint into the open ground, with nothing in his hands, no weapon, none, because they'd taken both, and 140 feet of gravel opened up in front of him with a shooter 100 feet in the air. Muzzle flashes started along the fence line, some of them at him, some of them at the water, some of them at each other, because half those men worked for a name that had stopped existing 11 minutes ago, and nobody in that yard knew whose side he was on anymore. The 3rd rifle round came in, and it was for the boy. Damien saw the line of it the way you see a thing you have no time to see. Noah, out in the open, 30 feet from the containers, turned around and coming back for his sister. He hit the kid at full speed and took him off his feet and got his arms all the way around him and turned in the air so his own back was to the gantry. and something struck him high on the left side while they were still falling, a punch with a red center to it, and then the gravel came up and took the rest of the wind out of him. He rolled, kept rolling, got them behind the bottom edge of a container with the boy's face crushed into his collarbone and the boy's hands locked in his shirt. "Don't," Damien said. He couldn't get enough air behind it. "Don't move, don't move, don't move." Up on the gantry, the shooter's light swung down and found them, a white circle on the rust 6 inches over Damien's head, and held. And 100 feet away in the black gap between the 4th and 5th stacks, an old man who had been in the water since 10 o'clock steadied his elbows on a steel rail, breathed out all the way, and took the one shot he had ever needed. The shot from the 4th stack was a single clean sound, and then the gantry light went out. Not slowly. One moment the white circle was on the rust 6 inches above Damien's head, and the next it was gone. And the silence where the light had been was so total that for 2 full seconds the firefight in the yard seemed to pause around it, men stopping mid-motion to process what they'd heard, whether that had been their shooter or somebody else's, whether the arithmetic of the night had just changed. It had. Fitch came down off his perch in the dark between the stacks and moved low along the fence line without making a sound, the way a man moves when he's been doing it since before most of the men in that yard were born, and he was at the corner of the loading dock before anyone had found the body on the gantry platform. Damien felt the boy breathing against his chest. Fast, too fast, the breathing of a kid who'd been trained by 6 years of his mother's fear to hold it together past the point where holding it together made sense. His hands were locked in Damien's shirt, and he had not made a single sound. "I've got you," Damien said into the top of his head. "I've got you. Stay down." The left side of his back was burning in a way that hadn't turned into pain yet, which he knew from the one other time in his life something had hit him, meant the pain was coming and would come in a wave, and he had to be standing up before it arrived. "Noah, look at me." The boy pulled his face back an inch. His eyes were dry. That was the thing that got into Damien's chest and stayed there. The eyes were completely dry. This child, 6 years old and pressed under a stranger's body behind a shipping container in a firefight, and not one tear. "Left," Damien said. "4th stack. Your mom told you. She said you'd say my whole name." "I don't know your whole name." Something moved in the kid's face, something that was almost the beginning of understanding something enormous, and was pressing up against it, and decided to come back to it later because there was gravel against his cheek and shooting 40 feet away. "Noah James Ashford," Damien said anyway. "Go." He went. He ran left along the container face and hit the gap at full speed and was gone, and Damien got himself onto one knee and then onto both feet and stood up into a yard that was coming apart in every direction. Vosloo's people were through the fence. He could see the flashlights and the vests at the south end, sweeping, shouting, and men were going flat on the gravel everywhere the light touched them. Half of them were already down. 3 were running for the water and 2 more for the road, and the boats were at the dock now, engines loud, searchlights raking the shore. He looked for Lena. She was at the 4th stack with her back against the container and Mira in her arms, and Noah pressed against her side, and she had a gash on her forearm she was ignoring. She had her chin down over Mira's head and her eyes up scanning the yard, and she spotted him 3 seconds after he spotted her, and her mouth went tight. He was bleeding. He could feel it running down his back inside his shirt, following his spine, soaking the waistband. The wave hadn't hit yet, but it was coming the way weather comes, as a pressure, as a change in the air. He looked at her across 40 feet of chaos and gravel and orange light. She looked back. He put his hands on top of his head. She shook hers, one hard shake, and he understood she was telling him not to do it. Not yet. Not while it was still this loud. And he understood she was right, so he stayed where he was with his hands laced on his skull while the yard emptied and the lights found the far corners. Victor Soren came out from behind a truck. He didn't have a weapon out. He came out with his hands in his coat pockets and walked toward the center of the yard at a pace that was almost casual, and Damien watched him, and Victor watched Damien, and for a long moment nothing happened except the yard got quieter around them as the shouting and the running moved toward the fence lines. Victor stopped 12 feet away. His face was gray. There was something wrong with his breathing, a high catch at the top of it, and Damien looked down and saw the dark spreading through the side of his good coat, low down, a wound that didn't announce itself. "Crossfire," Victor said. "One of my own guys, you believe that?" "You should sit down." "I'll sit down in a minute." He looked around the yard, the flashlight beams, the vests, the men being cuffed on the gravel. You called them. Sunday night, coffee shop. I figured it was the woman, Vosloo. He said her name like he'd been expecting to meet her for years, which he had. Was that the deal? You and your name in a room for 25 years? It's the deal. Because of the kids. Because of the kids. Victor nodded slowly. His hand came out of his pocket and pressed against his side, feeling for the extent of it, and his face registered the information without reaction. You know what kills me, he said. Not literally. Well, maybe literally. His mouth moved. I would have done it. Sunday. I would have opened the door and let them go. I had no intention of... He stopped. The breath thing happened again. Boyko wasn't supposed to fire. He was supposed to be an argument. That was all. A man on a gantry with a rifle is an argument, and then that idiot Rennie gets a text and the argument starts shooting. Damien said nothing. I didn't want the children hurt. Victor's voice went to something lower and stripped down. You've got to know that. For all the rest of it, you've got to know that part. I know that part. The rest of it I'll own. He looked away at the water. 22 years. I'll own all of it. He took his hand off his side and looked at it in the orange light, and what he found there made his breathing change again. You should probably call somebody. Victor. Call somebody, Damien. I'm going to sit down now. He sat down on the gravel, heavily, the way a big building settles, and put his back against a truck tire and his head back. His eyes stayed open. He stayed like that, breathing, while Damien crossed the yard at a walk with his hands raised and found Vosloo at the south gate. She looked at his hands, and then at his face, and then past him at the yard. Soren, she said, against the blue truck. He needs medical. So do you. He needs it first. She sent 2 people and looked at him for a long moment, taking inventory. 22 in custody, she said. 2 in the water that we'll have by morning. Boyko's on the gantry, which I assume is Fitch, and I'm going to assume that for a long time and never look directly at it. She folded her hands in front of her. Celeste Moreau is in a car at the gate in handcuffs, telling my agent she's going to own the building his pension is processed in. She might. She might. That's not my problem tonight. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. The woman. The kids. They're at the 4th stack. My people go to them, or you do? He looked past her at the stack, and he could see Lena's shape in the gap and the 2 smaller shapes against her. Your people, he said. Not me. Vosloo studied his face for a moment. Turn around, she said. He turned. She put the cuffs on herself gently, and he stood and looked at the harbor, the fog, the orange lights on the water where the boat sat, and he breathed in and out while the wave he'd been waiting for finally arrived and went through him in one long, burning pass, and he stayed on his feet, which was the last thing he needed to do. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She walked him out. The wound was a rifle round that had taken a piece of the meat below his left shoulder blade and kept going. The surgeon at Halloran said later that half an inch of trajectory in a different direction, and they'd have been having a different conversation, and Damien said that was generally true of most things, and the surgeon gave him the look that doctors give difficult patients and sewed him up. He was in a federal bed with a federal officer outside the door, which was the arrangement, and it was fine. It was the arrangement he'd chosen. Vosloo came on Tuesday morning with a file folder and a disposable coffee from the machine in the hall, which told him something about her budget and something about her character that he filed away. Soren's alive, she said. I know. Marco told me. Your driver shouldn't be telling you anything. He's not my driver. He's a man who drove me for 19 years and who is currently unemployed. Damien shifted against the pillow and felt the stitches object. Victor? Surgery Sunday night, ICU Monday, regular floor this morning. He'll live to be arraigned, which I think is roughly what he wanted. She opened the folder. He's talking, has been since 6 this morning, voluntarily, no deal on the table yet, just talking. She looked up. He gave us Kessler, the full peer structure going back 9 years, the 3 Port Authority men and the one in our building, whose name I'd still rather not say out loud in a hospital. She paused. He gave us the Delano organization, both of them, the old man and the son, which is going to cause a great deal of paperwork across 3 states. Victor was always thorough. He's also asked, and I'm passing this along, not advocating for it, that his sentencing memo acknowledged that no civilian was killed or permanently injured by his organization during his 22 years of leadership. She let that sit. Which is not nothing, apparently, in his line of work. It's not nothing, Damien said. Vosloo closed the folder. She drank the coffee and made the same face she probably made every time, and set it on the side table. Your deal, she said. My deal. Full cooperation, complete asset disclosure, 22 counts to which you've agreed to plead, and we recommend a sentence structured around civilian protection services and restitution programs. She looked at him steadily. You're looking at 7 years, minimum 5 with cooperation credit, in a facility I'll pick which will not be comfortable but which will have a visiting room. Visiting room doesn't matter. It might. She stood. The woman and the children have been relocated. I'm not going to tell you where because that's the deal you made, and it's a good deal and you should leave it alone. She picked up the folder. There will be paperwork tomorrow. Tonight you should sleep, if they'll let you, which they won't. She went to the door. Agent Vosloo. She stopped. The man in your building, Damien said. His name is on the drive under the Pelham account, third document. He's got a daughter at a school on Wentworth, and he walks her every morning, which he told me over dinner 4 years ago. I want that in the file, not to threaten her, to make sure she doesn't grow up thinking her father was honest. Vosloo stood with her hand on the frame. That's a strange thing to want, she said. I know something about kids who grow up not knowing the truth, he said. It's not easier. It's just a different kind of hard. She left. He lay in the federal bed and looked at the ceiling for a long time. The stitches pulled when he breathed too deep, so he breathed shallow. And the room was the kind of quiet that only exists in hospitals and in the aftermath of things that have finally finished. And he let it be quiet. And eventually, for the first time in 11 days, he slept. The trial took 14 months. Victor Sorin testified for 6 days and was precise and thorough and occasionally almost funny in a way that made the court reporter's face do something she clearly felt bad about. He was sentenced to 18 years and looked at the number like a man doing a budget calculation, and nodded once. Celeste Moreau's lawyers were as good as her father's money, and conspiracy charges that don't have a body attached to them are hard to make stick, and she walked out of a courthouse on a cold morning in November, looking exactly the way she'd looked walking into any room in the 8 months Damien had known her, which was like she'd already decided what she thought of it. Her father's shipping licenses were revoked in a separate proceeding that had nothing to do with her directly, and she absorbed that too. Damien watched none of it from outside a courtroom. He watched all of it from inside one, at a table, in the same chair, for 14 months. He pled on a Tuesday in February, 22 counts, and when it was done and the room had finished making the sounds rooms make, he sat there for a moment with his hands flat on the table, and he thought about a crosswalk in the rain and a boy who turned his face up into the headlights. 7 years. 5 with credit. He served 5 years, 3 months, and 11 days, and he counted all of them, not out of misery, but out of respect for what the counting meant, because a man who loses track of what he owes has already started lying to himself again. The visiting room had 12 tables and a vending machine that ate dollar bills, and a guard named Peterson who worked Saturdays, and who eventually, by the 3rd year, said good morning the way you say it to someone and not the way you say it to an inmate. Marco came the first Saturday of every month for 3 years and then got a job in another state managing a warehouse, a legitimate one, which had been Damien's specific and only request of him, and he came less after that, which was right. Fitch never came at all, which was also right. Fitch's presence at Anselm Harbor was a thing that existed only in a room in Damien's memory and needed to stay there. Rosalie Tyrone came twice. She brought food she'd cooked herself in containers that weren't allowed, and the guards let it through because she was 67 years old and had an orbital fracture on her medical record from a night she described to anyone who asked as a slip in the kitchen, and everyone who heard her say it understood exactly what kind of woman she was. The second time she came, she was thinner, and she sat across from him and put her hands flat on the table and said, I want you to know they're all right. I won't say more than that, because I don't know more than that, and I wouldn't tell you if I did, because that's the deal and you made it. She looked at him steadily. But I want you to know they're all right. He put his hands over hers and held them for a moment and said, Thank you, Rosalie. And she squeezed back once, hard, and that was everything. A sick. He got out on a Thursday in late September, which was nobody's planning, That was just when the calendar landed. There was paperwork and a gray bag with his clothes in it, and a form he signed, and a door that opened outward, which he pushed and walked through. And the air outside was cold and smelled like cut grass from somewhere nearby. And he stood on a sidewalk for a moment and put his face up, not performing anything, just orienting, the way you do when you've been inside. Voslu was leaning against a government car on the curb. She'd put on a few years and taken off a few other things, and she handed him an envelope and said, "Restitution program starts Monday. The program director is an earnest 29-year-old who is going to ask you to share your story with at-risk youth, and I want you to actually do it. I'll do it. I know you will. That's why I didn't frame it as a condition." She opened the car door. "I'll drop you wherever. I'll walk." "You don't have anywhere to walk to." "I'll figure it out." She looked at him over the roof of the car. There was a thing in her face that wasn't softness and wasn't its opposite. Just the face of a woman who'd been in rooms with a lot of men, who had done a lot of things, and had developed a finely calibrated sense for which ones came out, the far side of it changed. "The program's on Lassiter," she said. "Community Center, the one on the north end." He looked at her. "That's the end of my involvement," she said, and got in the car and drove away. He stood on the sidewalk with his gray bag and his envelope, and after a while he started walking. So, Lassiter Avenue, in late September, was still warm enough that people had left their windows up, and there were kids on the block that ran past the community center, and somebody had a grill going somewhere, and the light was that specific thick amber that it gets in the late afternoon in that city, in that month, pouring sideways through the buildings and turning everything it touched to copper. He didn't go to the community center that day. He'd go Monday. He walked past it, north, and turned on Dunmore, and stopped on the corner. The crosswalk. He stood on the corner of Lassiter and Dunmore and looked at the white striping on the wet asphalt because it had rained that morning, and the whole scene sat in the middle of the afternoon like something placed deliberately, a crosswalk under copper light with people moving through it in both directions. He stood there for a while, not performing anything, not punishing himself, not eulogizing, just standing on a corner where a specific piece of his life had cracked open and looking at it, because that was the honest thing to do. His phone, the new one, the clean one, a number nobody had yet, buzzed once in his pocket. Unknown number, text message, 4 words, Monday, noon, community center. He stood on the corner of Lassiter and Dunmore and read it twice, and then read it a third time, because the third time it felt true in a way the first two hadn't. He put the phone in his pocket. He walked. Monday came the way days come when you're waiting for them, slowly, and then all at once. And he was in the community center parking lot at 11:40, because the alternative was standing somewhere else, being unable to think about anything else. And this way he could at least be standing in the right place. He sat on a bench outside the main door with his hands between his knees and watched cars come in and out of the lot. And the earnest 29-year-old program director came out at 11:50 and told him about the schedule and the Thursday group sessions and the mentoring structure. And Damien nodded and heard about a third of it. At 11:59, a car he didn't recognize pulled into the lot. It sat for a moment with the engine running. The door opened. Lena got out first. She stood by the car and looked at him across 30 feet of asphalt, and she was 6 years older since a kitchen in Riverbend and a photograph on a fire escape. And she was wearing a coat he'd never seen, and she had her hair different, and she looked like someone who had built a life out of wreckage and knew every nail she'd used to do it. She didn't smile. She didn't have to. The back door opened. Mira came out like she always came out, which was all at once and talking, and she stopped when she saw him and looked at her mother and then looked at him, and she was 11 years old and she had her mother's mouth and Damien's eyes and absolutely nobody's patience. Noah came around the other side of the car and stood by the hood. He was tall for 11. He had his hands in his pockets. He looked at Damien across the roof of the car with a specific measuring expression that Damien recognized the way he'd recognized it the first time, in a kitchen doorway, in borrowed clothes, because it was his own face doing a version of the thing his own face did when he was deciding something. Nobody moved for a moment. Then Noah took his hands out of his pockets and came around the front of the car and walked across the parking lot, not fast, not slow, just deliberately, the way he did everything, and he stopped about 4 feet from the bench and looked at Damien directly. "Mom said you were in there for 5 years," he said. 5 years and change. "Because of us." "Because of me." That's the important part. Damien met his eyes. Because of things I did for a long time before you were born. You and your sister aren't the reason. You're the thing that made me see the reason. There's a difference. Noah considered that. His jaw moved the way Lena's did when she was working something out. She said, "You're going to be at the Thursday group," he said. "That's what I'm told." "I go on Thursdays," Noah said, "for the mentoring thing." He looked down at the asphalt, then back up. "They make you talk about stuff." "Yeah." "Do you mind that?" "I used to," Damien said. "I don't think I will anymore." Noah put out his hand. Not like a kid, not tentatively. Straight out, elbow level, flat palm. The handshake of a person who'd decided something and was closing it. Damien stood up and took it. They shook, once, and let go. And Noah looked at him a moment longer and then turned and walked back to the car. And Mira grabbed his arm and said something in his ear that made him go red. And he shoved her sideways, and she staggered and laughed. Lena was still standing by the car door. She hadn't moved. Damien walked across the lot and stopped 6 feet from her. Because 6 feet was honest, 6 feet was what the distance actually was between two people who had never once lied to each other except by omission and had paid the full price of it. "You came," he said. "I came," she said. "Don't read a book into it." "Wouldn't dream of it." Her mouth moved, didn't quite become a smile, came close. "The program director's going to want you to talk to high school kids about the life," she said. "He's going to make it inspirational sounding when he pitches it. It's going to be uncomfortable." "I know." "Good." She reached back into the car for her bag. "Because if you make it sound easy or good or glamorous to a 17-year-old, I'll know about it, and I will give you a much worse time than the federal government did." She slung the bag on her shoulder. "I work here, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Intake nurse for the community clinic they run out of the back." She finally used the license. Lena looked at him steadily. "I'm not telling you that because of what it means. I'm telling you because you're going to be here twice a week, and you were going to see me, and I didn't want the first time to be a surprise." "Okay." "Okay," she said. "Monday." "Monday," he said. She walked past him toward the door, and he turned to watch her, and she stopped with her hand on the frame, not looking back, the way she had once before in a kitchen on Riverbend, and said, "The girl, Mira, she's going to be difficult. She seems great. She's 11 and she already argues like a lawyer and she has no fear of anybody, which is my fault." Lena's shoulder came up slightly against the frame. "She asked me on the drive over what happens if she likes you." Damien stood in the parking lot in the September light. "What'd you tell her?" A pause. A small, genuine, tired, real one. "I said we'd see," Lena said, and went inside. He stood in the parking lot for a moment. The grill smelled from somewhere. The amber light. A crosswalk 3 blocks south where a boy had turned his face up into headlights and started all of this, or finished it, depending on where you stood. He walked to the door and went in. Down the hall, the program director was already calling his name, and the Thursday group room had folding chairs in a circle, and through a window at the end of the corridor, Mira Ashford was explaining something to Noah with both hands going at full speed, and Noah was listening with his arms crossed and his eyes serious, and every now and then he nodded. Damien watched them for a second. Then he turned toward the sound of his name and went to do the work.